At the cusp of the new decade, Nigeria's economy took an unforeseen turn. Even though we had existing challenges, the pandemic compounded our vulnerabilities. All is not lost. Through partnerships, we are managing the pandemic. By replicating this model, we can build resilient communities. Participate in the big conversation for action at the 26th Nigerian Economic Summit. Theme: Building Partnerships for Resilience. Date: the 26th to the 27th of October 2020. Register to attend at www.nesgroup.org/26. Hurry now!
And this would be domestic gas utilization and commercialization and implementing the NDC Sectoral Action Plan for Energy. This is one of a number of pre-NES 26 conversations that will explore trends on the horizon to enable Nigeria capitalize basically on new opportunities that will help us in building resilience by ensuring that Nigeria meets its sustainable development goals by 2030. So before we start, we need to do a little bit of housekeeping. All participants need to kindly turn off their microphones so that we can have a seamless conversation. Panelists, you have control of your microphones. I will prompt at the time when you need to put on your microphones. And for participants, if you have any questions during the panel session, please type them in. Either if you're logged on Zoom, please type them into the chat box when the chat box is disabled. And if you're on YouTube, please use the control panel and they will be treated. So to get us started, we will have a welcome address from Mr. Laoye Jayola, who is CEO of the Nigerian Economic School. Mr. Jayola, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dalagbo. Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Honorable Timipre Sylvia. Head of departments and agencies of government, captains of industry, members of international community, our esteemed panelists, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this pre-summit event of the 26th Nigerian Economic Summit, organized by the Sustainability Policy Commission of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. This year, we seek to engage stakeholders in a big conversation for action to shape strategic partnership, chart paths to recovery, and build resilience for the country's economy, business, and household. We strongly believe that this will put Nigeria in a strong position within the changing world order brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. The big conversation for action will be driven by a series of pre-summit events. One of it is this one that we're doing now. And it will kickstart discussion on the summit theme, Big Partnership for Resilience. And this will enable us to convene a wide range of stakeholders to deliberate on a broad set of thematic and sectoral issues with key outcomes. In the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, the slump in the oil price, aggravated by the reduction in the demand for fossil fuel, caused by a stall in economic activity in developed countries, led to a focus on national preservation and sustainable local growth. And as part of our commitment as a nation to the Paris Agreement, Nigeria has communicated to its nationally determined contribution, NDC, the goal to foster a low carbon economy and create a climate resistant society. I know and I'm aware that it's been a long time we're looking at, one of the things we're looking at, how can we take advantage of a huge of gases that we're flaring in the South and use the opportunity to save deforestation in the North. As simple as how can we ensure that our women no longer have to go and look for firewood and make life easier for them so that it is a win-win for every one of us. The NDC seeks to promote sustainable development with policies that delivers economic benefit, but do not compromise sustainable growth. In the year 2018, the NDC Sector Plans were developed for the following sector: agriculture, power, transportation, oil and gas. In the gas industry, there is a potential. In the gas industry, there is a potential to stimulate growth in other NDC sectors and create more self-sustaining off-grid power system. Therefore, it is imperative for the government, in collaboration with key stakeholders, to design policies that aligns with the NDCs. It is our hope that today's conversation, which is a public-private dialogue, will promote discussions on the NDC energy sector plans in the post-COVID-19 era and provide a platform for stakeholders to deliberate on strategic partnerships to implement the NDC energy sector plan. I trust that we will also contribute our quota and lend a much needed voice and support to make today's engagement a resounding success. I wish all of us a fruitful deliberation, and I once again want to welcome sincerely the Honorable Minister and the panelists to this discussion. Thank you, and God bless you, and God bless our nation, Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jayela. Thank you so much for that, for the welcome address. Without further ado, I know that we are expecting the Honorable Minister. He is in very important meetings at the moment, and we're expecting him. In his absence, I don't know if Mr. Derefaka can confirm if we will have the minister at the moment in a few minutes, or if he will be taking. Okay, so Mr. Derefaka is the technical assistant to the Honorable Minister. So please, can you unmute? So I want to believe that he will be taking the address on behalf of the Honorable Minister. We can't hear you. You need to unmute. Please, can you unmute him? Let me do that.
Okay, can you hear me now, please?
Clearly.
Good. The minister is still not here, and we've not gotten a signal from him, so he's still held up in this meeting. So I think at this point we'll progress, and then I'll take his speech, his keynote address. Does that work for you?
Yes. Please proceed.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. All right. Thank you once again. Permit me to read the Honorable Minister's speech, and I will stand on already established protocol. And like the Honorable Minister would like to say, always want to say, if the established protocol is wrongly established, then you won't blame him. So thank you very much. So I will start with the speech now. It is with immense pleasure that I deliver the keynote address at this gathering of national and global policymakers, business leaders, development partners, and scholars at the pre-summit event for the 26th Nigerian Economic Summit. I am positive that we possess both the human and natural resources to steer us on the path to building a resilient economy. But first, I want to especially thank the Nigerian Economic Summit Group for the theme of this summit, Domestic Gas Utilization and Commercialization, implementing the Nationally Determined Contribution Sectoral Action Plan for Energy. The summit theme is not only timely, but apt and one which we all should take to heart with a strong ownership in our work, no matter the field or level you are engaging. The theme put the national conversation on environmental and climate issues into a global context. The global context is, of course, defined by the Paris Agreement adopted in December 2015 and entered into force a year later. As you may recall, Nigeria and 176 other countries have now ratified this agreement, and this is phenomenal speed for a multilateral treaty. I will highlight the most serious challenge we currently face locally and globally, the climate change phenomenon. You will agree with me that curtailing negative environmental impacts in Nigeria and the air we breathe are some of the daunting challenges we face as a nation and, of course, of the 21st century. At a groundbreaking UN climate conference in Paris in 2015, world leaders met and decided to work towards putting the global rise in temperature to well below 2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. We all know that accomplishing these laudable goals suggests changes in the way we manage our environment. And as a nation, we have committed ourselves to the delivery of the NDC and UN's Sustainable Development Goals and their accompanying targets. The SDGs are a mixture of closely entangled social, economic, and environmental objectives. It is not possible to have sustainable social and economic development if we allow our environment to degrade. Alongside alleviating poverty, there is clearly a need to prevent and reduce all forms of pollution. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I believe it is essential that we acknowledge climate change and that we find sustainable solutions to mitigate and to adapt to its repercussions. Climate change is altering the character of our nation. We must increase our collective efforts to prepare and protect ourselves, our communities, and our environment from existential threats that climate change will bring. We are running out of time. According to former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, he said, "Nature does not wait for us. Nature does not negotiate with human beings. It is us as human beings that must negotiate with nature. We must harmonize with nature. There is no planet B, therefore we don't have a plan B, we only have a plan A." End of quote. Please allow me to give you some background narratives on the Nigerian gas sector, connecting it with the theme of this pre-summit. Now, Nigerian gas reserves were at 203 trillion cubic feet of gas as at 1st January 2019, with associated gas reserves slightly above 50%, with a total reserve life index of 92 years as at 2018. Our average daily production for gas stood at 7.97 BCF per day in the reference year. Now, you will know that Nigeria holds one of the largest gas reserves in Africa. And unfortunately, Nigeria, despite the beautiful picture of abundance of resources I just painted, we have one of the lowest energy per capita consumption in the world. There is also the grim picture of being one of the top 10 global gas flaring nations. Our flaring stood at 321.29 BCF, representing 11.04% of total production of gas. And now with the shutdown of some of our activities, it straddles around 7% thereabout. This brought to fore the need to urgently address gas utilization challenges in Nigeria. It also prompted the development of the National Gas Policy, which sets the plans and strategy for the development of the gas sector. Now, I would like to give some bit of highlights on the Nigerian Gas Flare Commercialization Program as the oil and gas industry's contribution to the nationally determined contribution. The NGFCP is designed as a strategy to implement the policy objectives of the federal government for the elimination of gas flares from Nigeria's oil and gas fields in the near term, with potentially enormous multiplier and development outcomes for Nigeria. It is also designed as a contribution of the petroleum sector to Nigeria's intended nationally determined contribution, INDC, under the Paris Agreement, which took place in COP21. It is a unique and historic opportunity to attract major investment in economically viable gas flare capture projects while permanently addressing a 60-year-old environmental problem in Nigeria. The gas we flare is an important part of the global energy transition and, of course, the closest ally to renewables. The UN has described energy are central to nearly every major challenge and opportunity the world faces today, be it for jobs, security, climate change, food production, or increasing incomes. Access to energy for all is essential. Nevertheless, even today, little or no access to energy deprives part of the world's population of the opportunity to improve their quality of life. It is based on this premise, another detrimental impact of gas flaring in the country, that the federal government of Nigeria took a policy position that gas flaring is unacceptable and will no longer tolerate same. A critical aspect of the national gas policy is to reduce gas flaring, harnessing flare gas to stimulate economic growth, drive investment, and provide jobs for Nigerians through the utilization of widely available and innovative technologies. Now, to support this strategy, the federal government included gas flare reduction as a key national greenhouse gas emissions mitigation in the NDC under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And as a solace, the NGFCP, consistent with Nigeria's commitment for reduction of greenhouse gas under the Paris Climate Change Agreement, will reduce Nigeria's CO2 emission by approximately 30 million tons per year, which could be monetized under an emissions credit or carbon sale program. Now, to demonstrate commitment to the NGFCP, the federal government, under His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, signed into law the Flare Gas Prevention of Waste and Pollution Regulations 2018 as the underpinning legislation to drive the NGFCP process. The flare gas regulation introduced a new payment regime for gas flaring, which adopts the polluter pays principles and mimics a carbon tax. The NGFCP utilizes a commercial approach to promote the utilization of gas via nimble, skid-mounted, plug-and-play solutions that can easily be deployed on-site to harness gas that would elsewhere be flared. This will introduce a new dynamic to the utilization of gas in Nigeria, especially boosting the economic utilization of natural gas. The first phase of the bidding round for the flare sites have reached an advanced stage, with investors submitting their proposals, and the Department of Petroleum Resources, which now implements the NGFCP, will soon announce successful winners and issue them permit to access flare gas. Now back to the new flagship of the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the National Gas Expansion Program, which is going to stimulate gas utilization in Nigeria. The NGEP is the current flagship program of the ministry that seeks to promote domestic utilization of natural gas. This is, however, without prejudice to all ongoing initiatives for the promotion of natural gas utilization within the ministry and its agencies. The NGEP has subcommittees on autogas, domestic LPG, which is cooking gas, CNG, compressed natural gas, LNG, liquefied natural gas, and gas-based industries. With the current drive of government to establish a fully deregulated PMS market, it is imperative to ensure that Nigerians have access to alternative fuels, which are cheaper and give great value to the consumer. Vehicles can be retrofitted to run on LPG, LNG, or CNG, which are cheaper than PMS. Generators can also be retrofitted to utilize dual fuels. The NGEP is working assiduously to ensure that Nigerians can have access to these alternatives in the coming months. You will recall that I had directed that vehicles within my fleet and all the fleet of all heads of agencies under the ministry be retrofitted to utilize autogas. This is to show that the Nigerian people our commitment to the process and prove to them that it works. With autogas, Nigerians will make significant cost savings in comparison to PMS at the current price levels. It is also hoped that lifting the demand on PMS in country may aid a downward price adjustment considering the normal forces of demand and supply. With autogas usage, the following are net benefits for Nigerians. Autogas is a cleaner fuel for a greener Nigeria. It is the eco-friendly option which keys into the theme of this pre-summit. It is a weapon against climate change, again, keying into this theme for the pre-summit. It is part of a more secure Nigerian energy mix. It serves as an economic alternative. It is seen as part of Nigeria's socioeconomic fabric and a wealth of untapped potential. Under the NGEP, We have also engaged multiple stakeholders across the gas value chain and hope to launch some pilot auto gas stations across the 6 geopolitical zones soon. In addition to the above benefits of these initiatives, it is aimed that this will inject much needed jobs into the economy in line with the presidential mandate to lift Nigerians out of poverty. Now, in summing up, I'd like to say the best need not necessarily determine the future. As a nation, we increasingly need to see that we are responsible for our future and accept this means steadily improving environmental stewardship and governance, both at national, geopolitical, and local levels, and of course, opening decision-making to a wide range of stakeholders. It means taking the lead in addressing the challenges of environmental sustainability and not hoping that international donors will step in and take care of these issues for us. Now, what I mean is that we can work with outside partners to ensure that it is Nigeria's agenda that determines what is done. Ladies and gentlemen, history tells us that when we look for common solutions to existing challenges, we benefit from collective insights and wisdom. As we set in motion to discuss and brainstorm on the theme and plenary topics at this summit, pre-summit, drawing on the lived experience and expertise of all stakeholders, I have no doubt that we will create a solid plan in finding a lasting solution to the environmental issues of our dear country, plus expand and diversify our economy. Hence, we need to innovate more and to communicate better. While reiterating my profound gratitude to the organizers of this great event for giving me the opportunity to make this keynote address, I wish you all a fruitful deliberation and look forward to receiving actionable outcomes from this engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, in addressing our environmental issues, let us also as a nation latch on to the transformative advancement of science and technology. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, represented by Mr. Justice Derek Parker. Thank you so much for a very, very well said, and concise presentation, of what government's plans are, in terms of petroleum resources, in terms of first the Nigerian gas commercialization plan, and the gas expansion plan. I thought it was really succinct and a number of things that we draw from there. One of this, the fact that we actually don't have a planet B. We only have one planet. What we have is a planet A. You don't have a planet B. Very interesting. And we hope that this is something that will see completion and that will meet the last mile end user. Without much ado, I'm going to thank you so much, Mr. Derefaka, for taking this on. And thank you so much, Honorable Minister. We hope that you'll still be able to join us at some point. We'll still be happy to have you.
Thank you.
So just moving on, I would like to go straight into the panel session, and I will start with introducing our panelists. Introducing our panelists before we go into the panel session. The first panelist I'd like to introduce is the only lady on our panel that I say apart from myself. Mrs. Audrey Joe Ezigbo is co-founder and deputy managing director of Falcon Corporation Limited. It's a wholly indigenous midstream and downstream gas distribution and trading company. She is also current president of the Nigerian Gas Association, and she serves as a member and fellow of a number of reputable organizations. This includes the International Gas Union, the Energy Institute. She's also a founding member of. So please welcome with me Mrs. Audrey Joe Ezigbo as she joins the panel. Mr. Edu Bong is the next panelist I'll be introducing. He is member of Shell Nigeria Gas Limited and is responsible for leading the company and safely delivering his domestic gas growth aspirations. He joined Shell in 2001 after completing a bachelor's degree in electrical and electronics engineering, from the Federal University of Technology, Owerri. He's passionate about unlocking the domestic gas to energy value chain. It may interest you to also note that he is currently first Vice President of the Nigerian Association. My next panelist is Mr. Daya Adesina. He's manager for the implementation of the National LPG Expansion Plan in the Office of the Vice President of Nigeria. The National LPG Expansion Plan is the program management office that has been set up to implement the proposed interventions under the National LPG Initiative. He is dedicated to creating a domestic agenda for gas expansion in Nigeria. Last but not least is Mr. Felix Ekundayo. He's Managing Director, CEO of Gas Terminaling Global Operations Limited. It's an LPG supply, logistics, and distribution company. He's also CEO of Power Limited, an off-grid power provider. Mr. Felix Ekundayo is a chemical engineer with over 30 years experience in the oil and gas industry. He's an expert at commissioning and operating midstream and downstream oil and gas facilities. So I agree with me that we have a really erudite panel here. And we into what I'm hoping will be a very, very engaging discussion. So to our panelists, I think the first question, and I will cue on who will be answering first, but the first broad question across to our panelists is, you could just tell the participants about what roles your organizations play in utilization and commercialization in Nigeria, and who are your end users. Mrs. Audrey Jozibo, if you could please start, I will cue the next panelist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dolapo. Very good afternoon to Honorable Minister, the CEO of NESG, and all my fellow distinguished panelists. My pleasure to be here. So as Dolapo said, my company is Falcon Corporation Limited, and we operate in the midstream and downstream segments of the gas industry. So we are the operators of the Ikorodu Natural Gas Distribution franchise. And here we're taking gas and delivering to industries that are then using them for various applications. And so we have end customers that include power providers, CNG, fast-moving consumer goods, steel companies, textile companies, companies in the packaging business. It's quite a robust end customer base. At the same time, we are also in LPG trading. And so we're delivering LPG to other bulk end users who are using them for different applications, as well as those who are using them for the proverbial cooking gas applications. And lastly, we are in the infrastructure space, also in LPG, building a 15,000 metric tons storage facility in Port Harcourt to help to, just deal with the problems about LPG distribution in the country and its availability at that end of the country. It's mostly concentrated here in the West. I'm also here on the panel, like Dolapo said, in my capacity as the president of the Nigerian Gas Association. And for me, it's an honor to be part of these types of sessions, because our role as NGA, we are that umbrella body that encompasses upstream, midstream, and downstream gas players and professionals and other people who are interested in building the gas industry in Nigeria. So this is always a good type of conversation we want to be involved in, to get to the meat of the issues that may be militating against the industry and get up actionable solutions that we can then share with our members, with the government, in terms of how to build a very resilient dumb gas industry. Thanks, Dolapo.
Thank you, Mrs. Jozibo. Thank you so much for that. Mr. Edubong. We can't hear you, although you're unmuted. No, and you're muted, yeah. Not sure why. Do you want to log off and log in again while we take Mr. Daya Adesina's remarks? I really can't hear you. Do you want to speak again? Maybe we can hear you. I can hear something now. No, still can't hear you.
It's very low.
Yes. Do you want to take off the headphones? Maybe we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Excellent.
Yeah, okay, so that's better. You can hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much. So just a quick intro around Shell Nigeria Gas.
I think it will be your connection. Yes, it's yes.
Can I go ahead, Dolapo?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so Shell has been in Nigeria for over 60 years. We are active in upstream, midstream, export in the LNG business, and also in downstream gas distribution. At Shell Nigeria Gas, we've been into gas distribution for over 20 years, looking at how we can get gas to industries, basically trying to sort of replace, to promote gas as a cleaner source of energy and fuel for Nigeria's industrialization. Today, we've signed up over 150 customers across 5 different states in Lagos, Ogun, Bayelsa, Rivers, Abia. We're also looking at opportunities to sort of grow that base. Our capacity today is about 200 million scof a day of gas in the domestic market. On the export side, of course, we do close to 2-3 BCF a day. It's a great opportunity to be here on the panel, just to sort of rub minds with the erudite panelists, looking at how we can build resilience into the domestic gas utilization sector for Nigeria. I think the key message for me is that we do need to accelerate gas development. I think the energy transition has started, but what we need for domestic gas is quite a lot of acceleration. We've seen a lot of energy coming out of the minister's office, different initiatives, the gas flaring commercialization program, the NGEP, the auto gas project, and these are all key initiatives that we are willing to support and see how we can ensure that domestic gas becomes the key fuel for Nigeria's growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Obong. So I'm going to shuffle things a bit. I will get Mr. Ekundayo's opening remarks on his 2 minutes on, what his organization, what role his organization plays and who his end users are. And then Mr. Adesina will basically talk about the LPG expansion plan in detail, also giving his 2 minutes. So Mr. Ekundayo, you have the floor.
Ms. Kukoyi, thank you very much. And thanks to the NESG for the opportunity to be here. Honorable Minister, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I like the statement made by the minister in the sense that we are responsible for our own future, because it actually describes how our own organization started. Basically, about 15 years ago, we were involved with a World Bank study that said basically that Nigeria was underutilizing LPG. I think at the time we were less than 50,000 tons per annum consumption. So that kind of created the idea to establish a local distribution company for LPG, which is where the gas terminaling business started. Our gas terminaling business now has a reach across the country. We operate out of Kano, Abuja, Ogun State, Benin in the east, Lagos State, Ilorin, and are expanding. Against that background, we also identified a gap in terms of gas to power. So beginning to use local gas, locally produced gas, liquefied gas, and transporting it via virtual pipelines to customers, to power generation facilities. We have been actively involved in this virtual pipeline operation now for about 12 years. We've been in the domestic LPG market for about 14 years. In terms of what our customer base looks like, we have 2 primary customer bases in the gas to power side, single site, large consumers. So in terms of multinationals, factories, large office buildings, with the opportunity for heat integration, okay, for energy efficiency. And then we have the other branch of our customers, which will be in terms of single site, multiple site, small users. So when you start talking about bank branches, you're talking about hospitals, you're talking about pharmacies, anything that has a chain, right? Those are the kind of people that we go in and substitute we become their in-house power provider, their captive power provider. Happy to contribute, and I would like to say that, I mean, in terms of the growth of the market, the Nigerian LPG market space, we're seeing phenomenal growth at the moment, and we've been happy to be participants in this program. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ekunda. It's amazing to hear what people are doing, you know, the different things that people are doing in different parts of the country. Very, very interesting. Mr. Adeshino, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable Minister, it's a pleasure to be here. The National LPG Expansion Implementation Plan was set up in 2017 following the approved national gas policy by His Excellency the President chairing the Federal Executive Council meeting of June 2017. Thereafter, the unit was set up in August of the same year. As a result of the various strategies that the government was willing to put up after His Excellency the President signed off to additional 20% reduction in greenhouse emissions in 2015. So two main programs that the government is looking at as quick interventions for reduction in emissions. The National Gas Flare Commercialization Program, which is headed by Justice Derek Facker, who incidentally is representing the Honorable Minister, and my program, which is the National LPG Expansion Implementation Plan. And our role essentially is to report back to an interministerial committee headed by His Excellency the Vice President, and to deal with all the various challenges that comes with the LPG sector, and also to interface with the LPG industry, various government ministries and developmental agencies, and also foreign DFIs, foreign donor agencies, and NGOs. One of the key aspects bedeviling the LPG industry that was quickly addressed was the removal of VAT. LPG was the only petroleum product that was subjected to VAT, and this caused a huge disparity within the imports becoming cheaper, and the locally domesticated LPG that's produced by mostly NLNG, the refineries, and some marginal field operators being more expensive. Another key regulatory aspect that's been resolved is the tariffs on LPG equipments, which His Excellency the President has given a waiver, a 5-year renewable waiver for all LPG equipment. Now, part of the key aspects of the policy, in the national gas policy, the LPG policy, which is embedded in there, is the domestication of LPG cylinders. We have a 5-year plan where we can at least import for the first 3 years, but by the 5th year, we have 50% domestication, and by the 3rd year, 50% domestication, and by the 5th year, 100% local manufacturing. This is key because the market structure going forward is going to change to a marketer cylinder owned model. Today, everyone owns a cylinder, and this creates a huge problem for the industry. safety is a big problem because the regulatory process by Standard Organization regarding cylinders states that 5 years after manufacturing, a cylinder should be recertified. 10 years after, it should be requalified, and 15 years after, it should be scrapped. We all know that there are cylinders that are 20, 30 years old within the system today. So part of the programs that we're looking at would also include autogas. We're taking 12 pilot states, especially under the ESP plan, which was brought about by COVID-19. The government thought to quickly put a stimulus package to be able to respond to the headwinds that would come from COVID-19. And LPG has front row seats in that plan. So does CNG. And as part of that plan, the autogas is a key aspect. You've heard a lot of press releases from the Honorable Minister on the plan by the government to engage private sector players, apart from government agencies, to change their vehicles and convert them to dual fuel so that they can run on autogas. Specifically, we are looking at the 12 pilot states to run a pilot after engaging with OEMs to have government vehicles in those states convert to autogas and then take it nationwide. We also have several other interventions. We collaborate with some of the other ministries. The telecom sector is a key target, looking at some of the emissions that can be achieved in the base stations that are all running on diesel. The agri sector is another key target for us, engaging agro-processors who currently are burning firewood using firewood for their burners. And we started transiting them from using firewood to LPG, and also using LPG for power generation. Power generation is also another aspect that we're looking at, and LPG to power, we're sure would take pride of place in captive power. You heard some of the things that Felix is doing, and a lot of industry certainly will benefit from that. Finally, we also engage with the midstream and upstream players because we need more volumes of LPG to come, since we're trying to domesticate the production of LPG, pending when the refineries can come in to support NLNG. But I'm sure you also heard early on in the year when NNPC announced that one of its subsidiaries, NPDC, would come on stream with about 240,000 tons to aid the current production levels from NLNG. At the moment, we're averaging about 90,000 tons a month in terms of supply. About 6 terminals have come on stream in the last 3 years. The latest one would be Techno Oil, that's doing a test run at the moment, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks should be commissioned. So our target is 5 million tons as a country. That's a conservative estimate, but right now we're averaging, at least this year, we can safely say that we would do, as an industry, 1.3 million tons. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Additional. Very, very interesting updates on what's going on with the LPG plan. Thank you so much for that. So we'll go deeper in the panelist session. Mrs. Joy Ezigbo, I think you're probably the only person who hasn't given your immediate reaction to some of the presentations we've heard. The other panelists giving their reaction. So I don't know if you have any reactions on what you've heard so far from the Honorable Minister's address and some of the feedback we hear on the LPG plan.
Right, thanks, Dolapo. I believe that, yes, can you hear me? All right.
Clearly, yes.
Thank you. I was saying that I believe one of the, I don't know who said that, I believe it was Ed, who talked about the issue of acceleration. Now, what is clear for me, especially a lot of excitement about what we've been seeing coming out of the ministry in the last maybe a year and a half. You can see a lot of dedicated focus on issues that pertain to gas, the same with the LPG expansion program. And so it's really encouraging. And if we had perhaps approached these issues with the same zeal and tenacity over the last few years, I think we would have been much further along the line in terms of gas development, in terms of LPG expansion. The issue though now is still that of how do we accelerate this so that we can ensure that the impact is felt even more tangibly and more in a more broader geographical spread. The reason I say that is because as a country, you know, we have peculiar constraints when it comes to gas and gas development. And I think we'll probably get into those conversations a bit more. And these are exacerbated by a lot of the other economic indices that we are grappling with as a country and how they impact directly in that gas space. But what is important for us is that at this point in time, there is that focus. That focus needs to then align with very strong partnerships between the government and the private sector, the investing world, to make sure that all the plans, all the strategies, all the policies, we can, you know, translate those into projects that then have a direct impact on the nation and the economy. So I think it's a good starting point for where we are now. And it's very exciting every time I listen to what is being said on the side of the government, as well as looking at what the industry players are doing in spite of many challenges to see how we move the building of a very vibrant and resilient domestic gas market forward. Thanks, Dolapo.
Thank you, Mrs. Joezibo. I totally agree with Mr. Edubongo. You know, we do need to accelerate. And that leads to my question, actually to Mr. Edubongo. So it's clear we've lost time and we need to accelerate. What, in your view, you know, and from your perspective, are the current constraints, you know, to developing, investing, you know, and operating sustainable projects? So projects that can, what I see that we need is a lot of acceleration and replication of models that would work and are sustainable. What do you think, you know, are the current constraints to doing that and getting gas to the last mile end user?
Thanks, Dolapo. I think Nigeria's challenges have not changed. If you sort of look back either in the 10-year horizon or the 20-year horizon. But what has changed, I think, is just the sheer will and tenacity that is coming out of the NPR office. We see that dedication from Justice Zerefaka. It's the same thing that we also see on the LPG side, the auto gas bit. But the basic problems are sort of still there. They're not very far. It's always around how do you create the right investment climate to allow investors to take a long-term view around gas development. For gas, it's always about 20 years at a minimum. The second bit is then just how do you then support gas infrastructure in two forms. Its most basic form, of course, is pipeline gas, which is the cheapest form of getting gas to where you need it. The second bit then is how do you support virtual pipeline operators? We've heard about the LPG success story and how we need to sort of ramp up to 5 million tons in a few years' time. But those are some of the sort of basic questions. Get the right investment climate. And in investment climate, I mean, you'll be talking basically just about the right pricing structure, clarity around some of the big concerns we have today in the gas industry. Today, I mean, we know that at the ministerial office, we're sort of running this regulatory pricing review with the minister's office, and we hope that we'll be able to sort of land that set of discussions at the end of the year. There is a third leg, which I think is possibly the most important, because at the end of the day, investors speak to various stakeholders before they take a position. And that's how do you carry your key stakeholders along. The Virtual Pipeline Associations, the Nigerian Gas Association, key people that are involved in the day-to-day operation across various.
Let's not beat around the bush. There are confusing regulatory outputs, despite the fact that we are trying to push. Yes, we're now all aligned. We've had several years of, how should we say, pulling in different directions. Now we're all pulling in the same direction, it appears. However, the regulatory risk aspect is the biggest challenge. I can say there are many a day where ourselves and our investors have literally wanted to pull out. Why? Because, for example, we're developing a project. It's taken almost 4 years to get all the permits. This is for a country that says it is serious about gas. 4 years to develop a gas project. Why? It's not necessarily all down to the ministry, the local government issues, the state government issues, but 4 years is ridiculous. So let's be clear about that. I'm glad that Mr. Adesina pointed out the success of the VAT removal. So basically VAT on LPG was removed. It removed that ambiguity. No sooner had VAT been removed than the PPPRA, which has no jurisdiction in LPG, slamming a charge, an administrative charge that is frankly double the VAT that was just removed. How does that make sense in an economy that's trying to push gas? So per cargo, before we were paying $500,000, now we're paying, that $500,000 was removed, now we're paying $1 million, or we are being extorted for $1 million by PPPRA. The charge has no basis, okay? So what are these issues? We have been trying to get these things resolved in terms of pushing forward. It is in our interest, okay, to grow the market. This market grew, the Nigerian LPG market grew from 50,000 tons to, as Mr. Adesina pointed out, likely to hit 1.2 to 1.3 million tons this year without government participation, because it was the only deregulated fuel. If it grew that much and it's the fastest growing LPG market in the world, what exactly is PPPRA administering? It never administered for the last 15 years. So what are they doing? What is it they're going to use the money for? The levy at the moment is a 2.5 billion naira tax on cooking gas. What is that going to be used for? What benefit is it to the industry? These are issues that we have to tackle. We can't be giving with one hand and taking twice with the other hand. When I give talks on gas, I always point out this simple statistic, okay? It's for every dollar equivalent of gas that we burn, we have to re-import $7 worth of liquid fuels as the energy replacement. That's a spread of $8. We're not doing ourselves any favors by self-interested, how should we say, parastatals trying to accrue as much revenue to themselves as possible, because in the longer run, the real damage is to the Nigerian economy, is to import substitution, is to balance of payments, is to local market growth, is to health of women. The consequences are too significant for these myopic approaches to policy making. So it is an issue that needs to be resolved. Regulatory risk poses the biggest challenge we have to growing this industry. It was deregulated. Now we are beginning to see a lot more regulatory interference, and that's a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akindaya. You raised the issue very succinctly and very pragmatically, and I think that is the value with actually having panelists like yourselves on the panel, where you say how it really, how the issues really affect you. Mr. Adesina, I don't know if you want to respond on some of what Mr. Akindaya has raised, particularly on this exchange of charges. So we had the victory over the VAT. Now we are slammed by somebody else. I don't know if you want to talk about that and how you are helping us in that respect.
Well, I guess the government was smart enough to drag me into government, knowing that I came from the industry, and so naturally, my phone starts ringing anytime that happens. Well, His Excellency, the Vice President, has actually, and the Honorable Minister of State Petroleum is going to resolve this issue. One thing is clear, a lot more engagement with government agencies is being done so that they can realize that yes, you need to generate revenue, but you need to grow the industry. And if you don't grow the industry, then there's nothing to generate revenue from. One of the key aspects for me is the awareness campaign that needs to be done, which we are doing. If you recall in my opening statement, I mentioned the engagement with in 12 pilot states. Part of that engagement is with government, the industry, and the people. Government, because a lot of agencies also need to realize the impact that LPG, if fully harnessed, would create a huge impact to the economy. The multiplier effect is tremendous. We estimate it to be a $10 billion market, but it would only be a $10 billion market if all the parameters that would allow it to thrive are put in place. Investors are willing, and like Felix said, a lot of the growth that you've seen has been purely private sector. And so part of the tough job that I have is to sit with a lot more regulatory agencies and government agencies so that they can understand the impact that this industry would make and how we can resolve trying to balance revenue generation with also wealth creation, which is what the industry does. The levy, I'm sure the Honorable Minister of State Petroleum would resolve this because His Excellency the Vice President has directed that this be done since the report was made by the industry. It's something that we're hoping that the agencies themselves, in as much as they're saying they're trying to help and trying to do their jobs, would also take cognizance of the time frame in which the expansion needs to take place and the rapid growth which has taken place in the last 3 years, and that certain actions might actually derail that. The intention of the government is to support the industry, and certainly revenue generation in this form is not the support that the government intends. A lot more communication will take place, needs to take place, and is taking place. That's the simple answer I can give. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Additional. And I think one of the things I draw from you is the constant struggle between having a holistic plan across board that everyone, stakeholder, government agency, everyone keys into, and we know, okay, at this time, this is what we are trying to do. And because we are trying to do this, we can't take certain decisions. I think it's really key. Mrs. Drezibo, we'll take your remarks on this question.
Yes, thanks, Dolapo. So indeed, there are a lot of issues about, just challenging the industry. So we've spoken to some of them, regulatory issues. We cannot continue to try to drive the industry by regulation. We must allow for competition, okay? And that's really key. And as the policy thrusts are coming out, we have to be able to look at what is attractive to potential investors. We have, any way you look at it, whether it is from the LPG, CNG, gas pipelines for PNG or NLNG, whatever it is, huge infrastructural deficit. And we need to create that enabling environment that allows for more investors to come in. We need for our own domestic investors to find our domestic gas landscape attractive enough to deal with. Of course, you know that there are challenges around funding. right? So right now, global investment capital is constrained everywhere because of what happened with the pandemic and oil prices. Now, when you bring this and situate it in Nigeria, where already we didn't have a very attractive landscape, our own local commercial banks are not able to give the kind of long-term funding and the kind of rates that would make for the economics of your gas projects to pan out properly. There are issues around securitization. There are a lot of commercial issues that need to be dealt with in the gas industry. So like Ed said, some of the legacy issues, a lot of them, we're still carrying them. Now remember the fact that we don't manufacture most of the components. So to deploy any gas project in country, we're talking about export. That means that there is also an attendant, very high foreign exchange exposure and risk profile that goes with any project you're looking at in the gas space. So again, if we just look at what has been happening in the recent months with the foreign exchange and your inability to even assess the dollar at the central bank rates, I mean, that constrains the bankability of any project almost from the beginning. Yes, we're excited and happy to know that the push we've been making to get pricing looked at end to end in a way that delivers value to all the players on the value chain and all the way into the end users is now a work in progress at the ministry. And we really hope that what comes out there will be a very robust, well thought through, very rigorous outcome that creates the framework for investments even going forward. There is also the challenge, I believe, of the credible offtake. So many times we talk about the fact that there is a lot of potential for gas in country, but in many cases that is actually constrained by the nature of the market, by the spread of the off-takers, by other infrastructural deficits, by different things. For instance, even within states, as simple as your rights of way, or if you need to cross a road, the kinds of levies that are imposed to get any project into reality. It's like the example Felix gave. You take out VAT and you create another double taxation. Many times the end cost of your gas project, which is then reflecting on pricing, has to do with a lot of these variables that are add-ons, and they're coming at state government, local government, federal levels. So really it's about, the government looking at that whole bucket of the infrastructure deficit, and this is across upstream, midstream, and downstream, and it's across whether it's LNG, CNG, or whatever, like I said, and realize that we must create a framework that allows the investors to come in profitably, right? And then be able to attract more people so that we have more players, and competitive forces will naturally take care of pricing. So this is one of the reasons why we've been talking also a lot about allowing the market to evolve into this willing buyer, willing seller place, so that it is more attractive to potential investors. So that's it. There's the fiscal frameworks, the legislative frameworks. When we're talking gas, we're still somehow all under the umbrella of the Petroleum Act of 1969. We need that dedicated legislation for gas. We need to see the regulations and policies that are coming out, also recognizing that private capital is what will be used to deliver on any of the government's aspirations. So we cannot afford to constrain private capital by some of the things that we bring out that take away from the viability of the different projects. So there's so many things to deal with, and there are legacy issues. So much as we're happy to see the push to get LPG expansion, to get auto gas in place, there are some things that necessarily must be addressed as we're going forward in trying to make these things a reality, because the only way it happens, like I said, is going to be about private capital, is going to be about the partnerships, is going to be about having a shared outlook as to what is possible if we allow for these partnerships to thrive, and where there's value across every segment of the chain. Thanks, Dolapo. I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Mrs. Dresden. A lot of valid points. Framework for investors to come in, not in, but operate favorably and profitably. Very, very important point. And dedicated regulation for gas. We heard that a PIB has been assented to. Let's see where we are going with that. Just shifting the conversation a bit and maybe looking at government side. And I'll start with you, Mr. Edubong. This journey to energy resilience, we want to become a sustainable country, to be able to have our own domestic gas utilization and commercialization. Is it purely a commercial play? Because I've heard across, government will always say, these people have come, these capitalists have come, we are here for the masses, we take care of everybody. Is it purely a commercial economics issue? Are there other critical considerations? Let's shift a little bit so that we can also be seeing the government side as well. Are there other critical issues? Or do we want to say, if the commercials don't work, there's no way it can be successful?
Yeah, thanks, Dolapo. I think what you just said is just what every businessman knows, and whether it's Felix or Dayo, who are now moved from the private to the government side. But the numbers need to work for there to be resilience. But when I sort of think resilience, I sort of always think about three key themes. The first one is that you need partners who are nimble and able to innovate, because the reality is that times are changing. We've seen the significant acceleration that we expect around the energy transition. You need people who are on the ground and are willing to take what we typically call Nigeria risk. But you also need capacity, and I think it's in that capacity that you have what Audrey alluded to around technical capacity, and then the financial and the commercial capacity, because delivering a project in Nigeria, like Felix had rightly sort of spoke about, is not cheap. You need to go with it for your full hog. There will be challenges. There will be moments when you want to sort of slow down. And you just need to have that sort of commitment to sort of see it through. The third bit then is just around, you need people who are in Nigeria for the long term. The gas journey is not short. It's never 3 years, it's never 5 years. Like I said, your horizon needs to start around 20 years. Where do we get to? And I'm really excited with the words coming out of the minister's office around 2020 being the year of gas. But now I'm sitting and waiting. We're in October next week. 2020 is coming to an end. So I want to also start talking about a decade of gas as the next new focus area. I'll pause there, Dolapo.
Thank you, Mr. Obon. Yes, so decade of gas, indeed. I think that we do need to start having that conversation, because if the goal, even from the NESG perspective, is that we are able to meet the 2030 goals, I think is apt. Thank you very much for those imperatives for resilience. Mr. Akindaya, I want to hear from you on this same question. Is it all about economics? Is there more?
I would like to say that I think we will pivot from economics into, how should we say, other social issues in terms of health, in terms of well-being, in terms of a more progressive and a more productive country. If we can't sort out the economy, then you don't have a situation where people are comfortable enough to be able to think of the higher level aspirations. Okay, we're still very much subsistence, even down to our energy needs. We need to be able to get away from that, get to an energy sufficiency level that then allow people to apply themselves more productively. Okay, I am an advocate. I sit in the oil and gas sector. I have done for over 3 decades. But the biggest resource that we have as a nation has constantly been ignored, and we all know what that is. It's our people. Okay, so first of all, let's try and make sure that we don't squander resources. Okay, let's make sure that first of all we sort out the balance of payment issues, which can only come through energy sufficiency. Having cheaper energy, more reliable energy gives us a much more productive economy. And then in doing that as well, the manner in which we get energy sufficiency is important. We're not going to say go or gung-ho on coal. That time has passed. The age of oil is beginning to pass as well. Therefore, this issue of I like Ed's point, it's not a year of gas, it's a decade of gas, it's a future of gas. other roles that we all play in and participate in there. The development goals that are the medium-term and long-term development goals that the Ministry of Budget and National Planning is currently working on that look out to the year 2020 in 3 blocks. So first of all, go out to 2025, 2030, and then 2050 in the long run. And in that time frame, we're beginning to look at things like advocates of electric vehicles, for example. What happens when there are no more petrol cars? I personally think that we're still a few steps away from that. We have to get to grid reliability and cleanliness of power for the electric vehicle future to come in. But in doing that, in planning for that, we must plan for how you generate the electricity in the first place. And that's really where companies like EDS, companies like Audrey's, companies like ours come in. How do we get power to the market to be able to develop sustainable and reliable grid power, whether it's grid, whether it's off grid? It's much more about getting energy to the population. There are considerations also in terms of, okay, how do we apply gas to grow the agro sector? One of the areas that the Ministry of Budget and National Planning is also looking at is we have a huge deficit in terms of the applications of agrochemicals in Nigeria. One of the problems behind that, again, is regulation and government allocation of resources. There was an announcement yesterday that the president had reduced the price of fertilizer, NPK fertilizer, from, I can't remember what, but by 500 naira. Those are decisions that should be made by the market, not by politics or policy. Really, what policy should be doing is to be encouraging more fertilizer plants to come on board, encouraging more methanol plants, ethanol, things that drive us towards biofuels, things that drive us towards cleaner fuels. So you're quite right. It's not all about economics, but economics is the foundation through which we then achieve the other aspirations we have as a nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akindaya. I'm sure that our participants will agree with me that we have a really erudite panel. As I'm sitting here, I'm learning so much from them. Before I go to Mrs. Ezigbo, I don't know if Mr. Adesina has any response to some of the things we said, and with your background in private sector. You know, is it maybe you want to talk to us about, from the governance side, how we see it? Is it all about commercials? What's the key consideration?
Well, it has to be the two. Government has responsibility to the people, as well as to the industry. The multiplier effect of having 203 TCF of gas means that we can take advantage of something that we have ignored for a long time. Only a minute part of the industry has consistently shouted itself hoarse to say this is a resource that we need to take advantage of. And I mean, it just beats everyone's imagination that we could be flaring so much, because that's money you're burning. Of course, the economic challenges that we're facing now means that there's a real retooling and more of a focus on the gas sector. But that focus needs to also define better the value chain so that we can make use of all the resources that come with gas. Without going into the LPG sector, and I stick to the gas value chain itself, petrochemical industries will thrive, methanol, fertilizer, the power sector. So there's a varied aspect that are all impact making, I'd say, secondary industries as a result of you harnessing your gas resources. And if we're blessed with this much of it, and only a tiny, minute fraction is just being used, and then we're spending money, like Felix says, importing so much, then we really need to sit down and have a clear-cut way of defining the value chain, such that real value is received by the people, by the industry, and by the government itself. If we continue to depend on foreign interests to develop our own local industries, then definitely we're not going to go anywhere. And you can see that the government has tried as much as possible to put up an enabling environment. Yes, there are challenges here and there, but I think now that there's a sustained effort to say that this collaboration with the gas sector is put at the front burner, then we would see those results that we're looking for within the shortest possible time frame. This can only happen if there's collaboration that shows and highlights where that partnership can really take place. If I look at what Mrs. Ezigbo has done with Falcon, for example, I mean, the tenacity, I mean, all the years, even at the times when gas pricing, when pipeline vandalization, a whole lot of issues and challenges. I think now's the time to at least start to put all that into perspective, that there can be a multiplier effect and there can be more investors if there really truly is a viable roadmap to getting us to harnessing this these resources, specifically to gas, going forward. So I'm fairly optimistic that, having advocated for such a long time, the government has taken note. The government is ready to do something about it. It wouldn't be a quick fix. There's still so many things for it to happen. But luckily, I think the private sector is also geared and ready to do it. And it's how that partnership goes on forward that will bring the benefits to both parties and the people on the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Additional. So we will be rounding up soon, but I would like for Mrs. Joe Ezigbo to weigh in on this. And whilst you are also doing that, you touched on something about states. The fact is that we all do businesses in states, and the conversations we have been having so far have been on the federal level. All the things we've been talking about are things on the federal level. So whilst you weighed in on this, on the last question that was asked, about is it all commercials, or is it more than?
Okay, Dolakbo seems to be hanging. Okay. All right, so I think that I've gotten
that. Please, can you also speak to?
Okay, well, I kind of missed the end of what you were saying, but I think I caught it about the state. So let me start on the issue of, is it all about commercials? No, certainly not. It's really not that. And it's good we're talking about gas, because gas for me and for the country is that transformative fuel that provides the bridge between the commercial issues and social impact. And I think the other speakers have touched on this, that when you talk about gas, we need to be thinking of many different variables. From the gas to power perspective, for instance, whether we like it or not, much as we're looking at renewables and other technologies like solar, for now, gas is that resource that Nigeria can quickly leverage on to ramp up our power production, generation, and utilization. And power is an enabler of industrialization. The more power we have, the more Nigerians, who are very entrepreneurial people, can give expression So that spirit of enterprise that is in them, creating the bigger industries, the smaller industries, the support industries on any value chain that creates work for our people. It also then brings, of course, a more secure environment, and we understand that connection. Gas is that tool that we can use in the agri space, and I think Dio just spoke to that. You know, just 1 MSCF of gas, you can create 63 pounds of ammonia. And if you then imagine what the multiplier effects could be on the agri sector, then it takes care of all these issues about fertilizer pricing. If we can generate our own fertilizer in country, and we have the resource to do so. Of course, also, when we're looking at the agri sector, it's not just about the farming, so there's the animal husbandry, everything else, but we want to look at the secondary leg about processing and about storage so that we create more products that have export potential that also help us to generate revenue and at the same time creating multiplier employment benefits. When we talk about gas, we look even in terms of the health sector. We look, I mean, it's just that robust. We've talked about the GBIs. When we look at the gas-based industries, those create several levels of smaller feeder industries. And in all this, I'm saying you keep hearing employment, you keep hearing impact. For a country that has over 63% of our population below the age of 25, necessarily we must be looking for how we're going to create employment for these people, given that even as we are currently, we have over 30, I think about 38% unemployment is our current reality. So it's important not just to be looking at gas from the standpoint of the projects and the economics and the private players, but really understanding that it brings direct benefits to the country and the kind of social impact that is an imperative for us for today. Now, some of us who have been in the industry I've been here now for over 26 years, we're also seeing this significant shift that we think is important that we are paying attention to as a nation. And this is the fact that global investment capital is moving away from fossil fuels. So I've been in deals that have been stopped now because suddenly entire countries are saying, no, we don't want to invest in anything that has any kind of carbon footprint. So we have a very small window to make this marriage work in terms of building the infrastructure, building the opportunities, dealing with all the commercial issues, and making sure that we can leverage the advantage of the social impact that it portends for the country. Now, looking at what the role of states may be, because like we said, everything we're talking is at the government level, the federal level. But even within the state governments, there are key roles to play. So every state government ought to have its own very clear energy agenda and be looking for how to partner with private sector to deliver that. I know, for instance, that Lagos State has that well mapped out, and they're also, partnering with private sector to see how to drive that. But in doing this, we want to look at different things, and I've touched on some of these things before. When you want to do a project and you have an agency that comes to put some hundreds of millions of naira demands in terms of licensing and permits on any project, you have projects where you need to cross the road. You have rights of way that are required. It does not make any sense. At the end of the day, we end up burdening our projects. I've seen some of the state governments more recently trying to create industrial clusters. But even at that, they have to look at how to make those things a reality, because otherwise we're looking at kind of a chicken and egg. In one of the state governments that we're in conversation with, they are trying to build an industrial park. They expect the industries to just move there. And I'm asking them, on what basis with an established industry, just up and move? You know what it means to move an industry? Move all their equipment and facilities into your industrial park when you have not provided the infrastructure, you have not provided clarity as to what kinds of benefits go with being in that industrial hub. And I think these are the kinds of things that matter, so that the governments are really looking at how do we create those type of cluster arrangements around the industries in our states. How do we enable those parks to thrive, so that then when you approach a potential supplier of gas, for instance, you're able to see that, okay, the economics make sense because they're not trying to lay 10 kilometers of pipeline to one industry that's taking less than 1 million scoop of gas per day. And on the LPG side, I think that there is also that imperative for states to partner with the LPG Association, with the NGA, with everybody, just to see how do we create added sensitization of the potential end users of this LPG, not just about cooking gas, I repeat, even though that's a very huge potential volume offtake market, but also because I know, and Felix is doing a lot of this work, being able to apply LPG to different applications for power, for different industrial and commercial concerns. So even the states can champion this by bringing their own, the government houses, the parastatals, all those buildings, their commercial concerns, the hospitals, bring them onto the platform where in partnership with the private sector, we can look for gas solutions, be it LPG, CNG, LNG, whatever it may be, you know, and seeing how they create an enabling environment, removing this issue of multiplicity of taxes. And I think it's very important too for the states to do a broad-based sensitization of their different agencies to understand the gas agenda for their state, the energy agenda for their states, and see how they partner to remove a lot of the bottlenecks that tend to constrain projects. And then huge alignment between the states and the federal levels, because sometimes you see, I've had, for instance, in my case, I have had somebody coming to try to build a power, high tension power pipe, what's it called, the poles, and that line on my gas right of way. I mean, how do you do that? And they're telling you that they have approval from the state government, from the federal government, whereas you have agencies that are supposed to be monitoring this, and you can understand that there is no way you should be trying to put high tension power pipelines, power poles on an existing gas pipeline right of way, for instance. So I think there is need for that kind of synergy, even between the state agencies and the government agencies, to make sure that some of the bottlenecks we see in the field are taken care of. And I think I can leave it for there at that for now. Thanks, Dolapo.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Juezi. A lot of things that you brought out here. I will talk about them in the wrap up. Mr. Edubong, states, role of states, and then Mr. Ikundayo will take that up as well. Someone seems to be sharing. Please go ahead, Mr. Ogo. Go ahead. I think that was an.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot. I mean, states, at the end of the day, for every private investor, you're basically working at the state level. So states play a critical role, both in providing the sort of right operating environment, and also playing as chief host for a lot of the other ancillary companies that we sort of provide services for. And we've had sort of clear situations where this work. Audrey has mentioned in Lagos State where there's clearly a lot of integrated planning around what needs to be done in terms of development across various thematic sectors. But again, this also sort of needs to be reflected across different states. You know, Gun, we've seen that sort of focus. We're trying to build the same sort of support in Abia, in Rivers, and in Bayelsa, but it's never really a very straight line discussion. And like Audrey has said, the link between what the states want and what the federal government wants needs to be tighter. It needs to be more seamless, especially around rules, regulations, levies, fines, etc. But at the end of the day, where we make our most impact as industries is at the state level, the communities, the people, the employment that we provide via providing energy to industries. And they remain one of our most important stakeholders. Thanks, Dolapo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edward. And have any thoughts on the states? I'm sure there is to share.
I'd like to echo what Ed's just finished on. There are we operate across several states, and we tend to find that the collaboration at the state level actually is better. There might be things that you get wrong at the beginning in terms of the states obviously have a desire and a hunger for raising IGR, but it is sometimes easier to work with the states in terms of trying to get them to see the bigger picture. Lagos State is usually quite exemplary in this regard, because once issues are brought to the fore, then we can try and get them resolved. We also have examples in other states as well, where they recognize that by having operations in the state, you are contributing to local taxes and so on. It can get a bit more problematic at the local government level than at state level, because there really it becomes almost a law of the jungle. So one of the issues we've been trying to highlight is that there needs to be some kind of harmonization across all the LGAs, all the states and so on, some playbook that we follow so that industry is not hampered. I'll give you an example. One of the representations we have made to the minister's office and ultimately then escalated as well to the VP's office is the fact that in order to operate a virtual pipeline, so it's a fancy name for a truck, okay? But in order to operate a virtual pipeline, right, we need 49 licenses. We documented them. We initially did not believe it when we asked, right, so for these licenses to be collated. So we had to physically ask for them to be brought in, and there were 49 licenses. There was a license called a mid-year license. I mean, quite frankly, I don't understand it. Apparently, they ran out of money that they collected in the first part of the year, so they created a second license called a mid-year license just to collect additional money. It's ridiculous. So, but if you don't have any one of these, you will have a problem moving between geographic boundaries, and those geographic boundaries are local government boundaries or state boundaries and so on. So you employ people just running from one office to the other, pushing paper to get you these licenses, right? It's not a way that a country can grow effectively. So some of these, the VP's thematic or signature policy, which is the ease of doing business. There's currently a lot of unease of doing business, and the job of the administration is to try and unravel some of this. We are fast approaching the end of 2020. We need to see some, how should we call it, expediting of these or removal of some of these barriers so that it becomes easier to operate, easier to grow, and easier to create employment. We've got conflicting demands from the government at the moment in terms of a desire to create employment, but also being the biggest impediment at whatever level, whether it's federal, state, or local, in being able to grow one's business that quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kunda. Mr. Addition, I don't know if you have any responses to some of those things we've heard, 40. And if you have a fleet, that's 40. We really do need to move to questions. Okay, I hear that we have a little bit more time. Okay, fantastic. Mr. Additional, please, you have the floor to respond to some of these things. How will we actually do business in this country? 49 licenses for one truck.
Yes, thank you, Dolapo. It's a great concern. If you recall, in my earlier presentation, I said the key targets for awareness in the pilot states is the government, the industry, and then the people. Now, for the government itself, the states, we're having workshops for the states because we see this as a partnership with the industry. And if you can't create an enabling environment for the industry, then the industry is not going to invest and you're just going to scare them away. Like Felix said, 49 permits to be able to run a truck. That truck would definitely not have any returns on investment if it spends half the time battling one agency or the other. You move from one state to the other, and then, I mean, a journey that should probably take you half a day turns into 2 days, because every time your truck driver has an altercation with some regulatory agency or agents of the local government who are trying to generate revenue. And that's why we decided to have workshops for the states so that they understand the critical roles that they play if we're to be successful. The multiplier effect of this is significant, and they themselves will be part of the ultimate benefits and beneficiaries if this works the way that we anticipate it to. So it's a key issue. We've had the first workshop for the first state, which was Lagos State. And their own solution was to try and have a one-stop agency that would deal with all these issues, the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, to coordinate some of the other state ministries in driving the expansion forward. We've seen situations, I have a classic example in one of the northern states where an investor who was trying to put up a recertification plan was delayed 6 months simply because the state government refused to allow the contracted ESIA consultant to do his job because they wanted to do it. In the end, it turned out to be a 350,000 naira levy that the investor had to pay. Now, easily that could have been resolved if that was, displayed at the beginning. Now you've lost 6 months because of 350,000 naira, and you still didn't do it as a state. So it's those kind of things that we've seen that has made it imperative for us to engage the states. And like I said, with this pilot state, we'll learn a lot more, and also have those workshops for the state exco, because once the state exco understands what you're trying to achieve, it's easier to bring in the other forms of government, the local government, traditional rulers, market women. Everybody needs to understand what the government is trying to do, and that's the only way that we can achieve what we're trying to achieve. So it's something, like I said earlier on, my phone rings all the time when there's one issue or the other. And typically, it's to do with one agency of government that's, being difficult with certain spurious charges or certain laws, even laws that don't exist. And it's critical that that synergy between the industry and government, is carried out through down to the state level. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Additional. More strength and grace to you as you continue to help us, in this, but they're real issue questions. I have some questions in the chat. Yes, I have some questions. Please put your questions into the chat box. We will start with questions. I will direct the questions to panelists who I think may be able to take this, but I'm happy for other panelists to please indicate if you also like to take the questions. So the first question is from, I think it's Mr. Oladele. He said, Felix spoke to the growth of domestic consumption. What public education is being done in the North to enhance economy under the gas and terminal? This drive appears to have died. A good question for Mr. Additional to take, and if Mr. Ekunda also wants to speak to it.
Okay, so you recall again that I said earlier on that the marketer cylinder-owned model is what we're looking to carry out. I think his question is really to awareness and the last mile. Awareness campaign is something that was the start point for us. Again, I'll refer to the engagement with the states. If the state executives don't understand what you're trying to achieve, no matter, you can't even do the awareness campaign without them. luckily for us in the Interministerial Committee, the Honorable Minister of Information is part of that committee. And one of the things we intend to do is use all the agencies of government, the media, social media to carry out campaigns through social media, radio, TV, in all those pilot states that we've talked about, and then the entire country in general. But if we don't have that collaboration where the states actually understand the role, I remember in a state, a particular state in the north, where the women there own land, the agri-farmers, and we asked them why they were not using LPG, and they said, well, it's for rich people. So even the mindset, the cultural mindset, is something that we need to address. In another area, just to be able to see if they even have an understanding of how to use a cylinder. A lady put the cylinder probably about a few meters away, the cooker in another area, and then try to set the thing from afar. So it's really the start point for us, the awareness campaign. But we also needed to deal with certain regulatory issues because, I mean, it's going hand in hand, but we needed to deal with those regulatory issues because the industry you're trying to carry along will not go with you if you don't sort out those things. But at the same time, we also needed the state governments to also understand what we're trying to achieve and what is needed. So that awareness campaign is actually critical, and we're about ready. Once we're done with the workshops for the state governments, then we can go full blown on the awareness campaign. The reason for a marketer cylinder-owned model, like I said, is to be able to get to the last mile end user. So today, everybody owns a cylinder, and that poses a huge danger because 5 years after manufacture, the regulation states that you're supposed to recertify a cylinder. 10 years after, you're supposed to requalify, and 15 years after, you scrap that cylinder. The cylinders that are 20, 30 years, I mean, in people's homes. So that's a huge safety concern. And so with the marketer-owned model, the government is going to inject cylinders through the marketers who would, with the retailers, have that exchange take place in the homes. Because really, as you're creating that awareness, you also don't want to create problems where you start having explosions and problems. I mean, the industry is dead once that happens. So it's a sustained effort where that awareness campaign is actually carried out in conjunction with the industry as well. There's a massive employment aspect to all of this. And it's that awareness that would allow the industry to be able to carry that last mile function going forward. So that's something that's at the top of our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Additional. Mr. Adinda, maybe from your perspective, from a private sector perspective, and the fact that you are president of the LPG Association, what's private sector doing in terms of awareness?
Okay, unless you are aware of a promotion, I'm the deputy president. But on a more serious note, this additional point is on point. Basically, the challenge. So the question from Engineer Ladley was about the programs that a number of companies, including ourselves, did some years back, which is introduction of a range of new cylinders, injection of cylinders into the market. The challenge back then was the fact that we were effectively pushing a Rolls-Royce into a Jankara market, to use a phrase. Okay, we were pushing cylinders that were standard cylinders when the majority of cylinders in the market were not standard. Basically, there were stolen cylinders from overseas, there were second-hand cylinders, and there were substandard cylinders being brought in from cheaper manufacturing regions across the world, specifically China, for example. So in that context, we had a problem where people perceived price only and not quality. So essentially, the cheaper cylinders people will go for, which were then not really designed to hold LPG. I want to kind of go on a small tangent. Earlier on, we heard from Justice Derifaka on the issue of flaring, and I think the figure he gave was something in the region of about 321 BCF, roughly. I think that's what he said, per annum. I did some quick numbers, and that works out roughly at about the equivalent of a gasoline tanker being flared in each local government every day for the last 50 years. I think we had an incident in Lagos last week, and it made the national newspapers, right? To give you a context, that is a gasoline tanker going up every single day in every local government for the last 50 years. Now, the reason I make that kind of dramatic statement is to say that the biggest loser literally is the government. Therefore, the biggest beneficiary of any change in that regard is the government. And that's why, for example, Mr. Adesina's office has been pushing the cylinder program. Who owns the cylinder? It has to move from an ownership, individual ownership model to the distributor or the marketer owning it and being responsible for the life cycle of the cylinder. There's also the aspect of also harmonizing all the standards. And in this regard, Standards Organization of Nigeria have been exemplary. In the same way that we call out regulatory agencies that have been challenging, we must call out those that have been exemplary. And Standards Organization in the last 18 months have gone through a raft of standards to bring the country into alignment for the end-to-end value chain of LPG. So basically, in terms of standards for cylinders, they've done it, standards for steel cylinders, standards for composite cylinders, standards for regulators, for hoses, for trucks, standards for the fuel. And as soon as the minister's office announced the the advent of the autogas policy, which is barely 2-3 months ago in terms of an announcement, SON has already adopted, reviewed, and approved a new standard for autogas in Nigeria. So to Mr. Adesina's point, there's been a lot of time spent in the industry preparing the groundwork. Now we are moving on to the next stage, which is an expectation of the government, who is the biggest beneficiary of a cessation of flaring, to do its part to inject cylinders into the market and to provide this to the most needy, i.e. in terms of the rural areas. And it's not just about providing the cylinders, it must be to promote the understanding of the use of it. You don't want to provide cylinders and people are killing themselves in their homes. The understanding of the use of it and in the supply chain to get gas to these people on a sustainable basis. Thank you. Can you still hear me?
Well, I guess she on a coffee break. Well, maybe we can look through some of the other questions. I'm looking through the chats, and I guess if everyone does that, maybe we can.
I see something.
Apologies.
Okay.
I hope you can hear me. Apologies. I'm having technological issues on my laptop, so I had 2 connections and had to be unmuted. Thank you very much, Mr. Ekundayo, for that. There's one question about gas supply to power plants that I would like for Mr. Edubong and perhaps Mrs. Ezigbo to take. Just scrolling through to get the question now. Yes, it's from Frank. It says, I'm happy to hear the good news on the domestic LPG supply, But my question has to do with gas supply for the power plants. What are the plans of gas suppliers? What are the plans of, I think this is 4 gas suppliers, all gas, of gas suppliers, yes. All gas suppliers are on a best endeavors basis, but for the power plants to produce power, they need proper gas supply assurance. I'm sure that this is an interesting topic that Mr. Edubong and Mrs. Ezigbo will be happy to take.
Olapo, thanks. I'm not sure whether happy is the word. Yeah, but I think in fairness to gas suppliers, we've seen again a lot of acceleration on the federal government side. I mean, if you've sort of been following what's happening on the project side, the government has sort of commissioned these 7 critical projects in upstream that would deliver close to 3 TCF of between 1.5, about 1.5 TCF of gas to the domestic market. One of them, of course, is the Asa North project, which SPDC JV is involved with, and we sort of took FID at the end of last year. There are also other ones that in Bayelsa, Renimo, that will sort of ensure that more gas volumes sort of get to the surface and therefore get to the biggest gas consumer today, which is the power plants. But that's one thing on the power supply side. That's the supplier. But I think there is also the sort of commercial side of it, which is around ensuring that gas supply is paid for, which I think is where you sort of hear a lot of concerns. There's really no profitable business if gas suppliers spend capex, bring gas to the surface, supply power plants, and at the end of the day, they are owed huge sums of money. And I think that's a lot of focus around where the minister and MPs are also trying to see, and together with the NERC, how do we fix the power chain such that gas supply can be paid for. We've all heard about the NBET intervention fund, which is being used now to sort of clear some of the legacy debts. But we also need to ensure that even new gas supplies are paid for as they occur. It's not an easy problem, but I think it's one that is receiving the right focus at the moment. And I think if that sector works, then a lot of the stability around power supply would then become more realistic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Obong. Mrs. Ezigbo.
Right, Dolapo. I believe Ed has really said it all. Yes, the reality is that we see a lot of best endeavor supplies because we still have some GSAs that are not signed, and but you see private sector deciding to just amongst themselves see how they can make things happen and not put the whole country in darkness. The liquidity one is a huge challenge. It's been a conversation at the NGA level for years, just trying to see how we get past the structural issues. There's just so many issues in the power value chain. And of course, it impacts directly on the gas supply side. And until we are ready to deal with issues of tariffing in an appropriate manner, and then look at structurally as well, issues around transmission, generation, distribution, and the like, we're going to keep seeing this problem. What we're looking forward to is some kind of a solution that takes us out of the bracket of continuously looking for payment assurances and intervention funds, but that the structure, the value chain actually works. That's the only way it becomes sustainable. That's the only way it becomes attractive to new entrants. Because what we have now is the people who are already playing in that space some of them are looking for how to exit. Okay, but you're talking about seeing how you ramp up production from, I think at best we did like 7 gigawatts. I think that's the statistics from March, about 7.7. And this is a country where power needs are significantly much higher than that. Okay, so I think that it's just as the government is looking at those issues, they must necessarily go and look at the structure of the market, look at the tariffing issues, make sure that these GSAs are signed so that it's a commercially viable value chain. For us as a country, again, I repeat, until we fix the power, a lot of our other aspirations are going to be constrained because we need power to be able to deliver on many of the things that we want to do for this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ezigbo. I don't know if Mr. Akindaya has any comments on this.
On this one, I would say that the previous two speakers have actually covered
Yes.
it. So I'm happy with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm not sure we have any more questions. I don't see any more questions in the chat for us to respond to. Maybe we can start to wrap up. I would just like to hear last words, starting from the lady in the room. You know, just your last words and last message, what to get us to where we need to get to. I've heard acceleration is key, you know. If you can give us some of the last words in 2 minutes on what are the for, then we wrap up.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you very well, Dolapo, but I'll just, yes, I will just wrap up by saying that, you know, if we bring us back into the theme and what we're looking at in terms of the NDCs, and ask ourselves what were the objectives in the first place. So we're talking about a reduction of flaring. We're talking about improving energy efficiency, 2% year on year till about 2030. We're talking about seeing how we can.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was asking about.
We're talking about seeing how we can generate about 13 gigawatts of off-grid solar power. We're talking about how we improve rural electrification and the rest. And the question is, how well have we done? And the response is that, like we have all collectively agreed, especially under this current set of leadership that we're seeing, there has been a lot of focus. There have been policy strategies, action plans that are coming out that look like there is now a much better and deeper understanding as to the things that need to be done. However, we must necessarily accelerate the pace at which we are doing these things. There must be increased collaboration with the private sector. We must be willing to take the bull by the horn and have the will to deal with a few of the legacy issues that have bedeviled the industry. And unfortunately, these things are not necessarily going to be very popular with the people, but they are imperative if we are to get the investment in. I honestly believe that we have to put that investment mindset out first, because that's the only thing that ultimately then brings us to where we have enough infrastructure, we have enough industrialization, enough power generation, enough employment that then takes care of all the social imperatives of the country, the things that the government is looking to deliver onto the people. And so in summary, it's just to say that this is the time to maybe look at private capital with a different eye. I must say that sometimes there is the sense that there is, for those of us who bothered to, you know, take the risk and make the investments at the time the landscape was totally unclear, totally uncertain, when gas was not even recognized as the transformative tool that it was. You know, it almost looks sometimes like we're the ones now bearing the brunt of some of the outcomes that come. It's like trying to constrain the things we're trying to do. However, if we step back a bit and look at it, we must understand that it's not so much about seeing how much more you can milk out of those who are already in the business, but how to create a fiscal friendly regulatory policy landscape that allows other people to look inwards and decide that it makes sense to invest in these sectors. I think that's very important, and I want to leave it there because we don't want to come back in 2030, and we're too close to 2030 as it is. But we don't want to certainly come back to 2030 and not have very tangible mile markers of progress when it comes to the NDCs, when it comes to energy security, sufficiency, sustainability of the environment, and, you know, just building that more resilient, climate resilient environment that we're all looking forward to in accordance with the Paris Climate Agreement. So thank you all. It's been my privilege to be on this panel with all these very distinguished people, my brothers in the industry, and Dolapo, someone who I also highly respect in the industry. Thank you all very much. And thank you to NESG for this opportunity. Thank you. Thank you all very much. And thank you for
Thank you. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay. Just checking. Thank you so much, Mrs. Ezigbo. A lot that we need to do. If we could hear from Mr. Akindaya and then Mr. Edubong, and then Mr. Adesina last.
I'd like to, again, kind of agree with Audrey's assessments and conclusions. Currently, I'm also sitting on the working committee for the Ministry of Budget and National Planning's plans for the next level of developmental goals. And one of the challenges was looking back and reviewing what has already been done, what was already the previous plans and the previous policies. That was somewhat sobering. This country likes to put in a lot of good work in paperwork. What we've always lacked is the execution, the follow-up, okay? And there's some sense amongst participants that are we just preparing more documentation, more paperwork, more sound bites. If there really is a commitment, if there really is the drive, the willingness to push forward on this, we can achieve significant milestones in the energy space whilst there's still a window. We have been approached by companies or funders, financiers, who previously were very keen on Nigeria, but they have a number of caveats now. One, their boards are no longer keen on clean energy, gas energy. They're out for renewables. So that's already a caveat preventing them from investing. Secondly, they see policy flip-flops, right? You encourage an investment in this direction, then you slap on fees in that direction, right? It doesn't encourage anybody to come across and put their money and capital in Nigeria. And the one thing Nigeria needs desperately is capital to develop these markets. We have a very narrow window to actualize what we say by the year, the decade, and the future of gas. The only obstacle in our way is ourselves. Let's get to executing. Let's get to avoiding self-inflicted, unforced errors. And let's finally realize the value of the resource, the extractive, gas resource, and move away from an extractive, a milking, a rentier mindset in terms of the regulatory environment. On that basis, I will close, and I will say thank you very much to the NESG as well for the honor, and to the August panel with which I'm sitting here. Thank you, and good day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ndayo. Well said. Mr. Edubong, please.
Yeah, thanks, Dolapon. Not a lot left to be said after Audrey and Kundayo. So I think, and Felix, but I think basically the NDCs is for Nigeria is around how we develop a low carbon economy. It's now common knowledge that Nigeria has a significant energy deficit. So, but even more common, of course, is that Nigeria has about 200 TCF of gas sitting as reserves. It then means that it's just simple. We need to accelerate gas development. 2020 in many ways has been a success. We've seen a lot of focus. Like the minister has said, it's been a year of gas. Lots of innovation, lots of energy coming out of the minister's office. I'm looking forward to seeing this being sustained for the next decade, if the real foundations then need to be built upon. And it's across various thematic areas. The role of government has always been to regulate, and it's how we are able to get the right regulatory framework in place that would determine the success or failure of the next sort of gas development phase for the next decade. I think I will leave it there. As Shell in Nigeria, we are committed to helping Nigeria close its energy deficit. We're doing a lot of work around the power space. The AFAM power plants still generate between 7 and 10% of Nigeria's production capacity, even as of last year. We're actively trying to sort of bring down our gas flaring numbers. Since 2010, we've reduced those numbers by about 90%. On the industrial side, we're looking for partners, virtual partners like CNG operators, 4 of them in Nigeria, who sort of help us take gas to where pipeline gas doesn't get to. We're looking at how we can sort of support industries to take off. We're speaking to the LPG teams, we're speaking to the auto gas teams. What can we do differently to sort of support them? And I think it's that sort of close collaboration between the government, the industry, and all the various stakeholders that will enable success to be achieved as Nigeria tries to close its energy gap. So thank you very much, Dolapo. I mean, it's been a privilege to be part of this erudite panel. Thanks to the minister for sort of setting the tone. Thanks to NESG, as usual, as always being in the forefront of making Nigeria to move ahead in terms of economic development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Edibon. Thank you. Mr. Additional. Not sure if it's me, but I can't seem to hear him.
I think Mr. Additional is muted. Yeah, excellent.
Okay, finally.
We can't hear you, Mr. Additional.
Yeah, because you didn't unmute. Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot. I think it's been very engaging, and the real message is that the government is ready to at least follow through. It took a lot for the NDC to be prepared and for it to be for the government to agree. At least haven't seen the effects of deforestation in the north and sort of climate change impacts with flooding in all sorts of places. But one thing that's critical is that with the partnership that's required between government and the private sector, communication and how that message is passed on is quite important. And also the understanding of sectors like the banking sector when they assess projects. The buzzword is green, and you still see projects that are financed that are not green. And even trying to access funding from DFIs, if your projects are not classified as green in the real sense, then those, funds are not flowing as quickly, or those projects are outrightly rejected. Excuse me, so to speak, we need that mindset, that orientation where if we want to achieve reduction in emissions, it's a wholehearted campaign that everyone participates in. The local government chairman needs to understand the role that he will play, the banking officer, down to even clerical people. So there's a whole mindset and the whole ecosystem that needs to be created for us to be able to achieve those emissions. Government will play its part, the private sector will play its part, and how that collaboration takes place is what would give us the results that we're looking for. So in closing, I think the communication and the message is still not as clear, where everybody sees how they can play that role in achieving the emissions reductions. I remember in one of the meetings that I was in with some other agencies, and I said, well, I know what our target is, 5 million tons. And we know what that 5 million ton target would contribute to emissions reductions. Where are we as a country today in terms of reductions? And I didn't get the answers I was expecting. So It also shows that there needs to be a lot more engagement and collaboration between all sectors, be it government, be it private sector, for us to be able to achieve what we're trying to achieve in terms of emissions reductions. Thank you very much, NESG, for putting this together. I come from that family, so I'm not surprised that getting towards the summit, we're engaging in all sorts of discussions. And thank you to fellow panelists, everyone I know and have worked with at some point in time, and will continue to work and engage with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Additional. The issues today have been fantastic. I hope you can hear me. Okay. Thank you so much for the roundup. I will just wrap up so that technology can allow me to do this as quickly as possible. It's been what we've heard today. One of the things that we've heard is the fact that what we've heard about, the imperatives that we need, in terms of how we can take our energy deficit forward and bring in investment. We've heard that there must be a right investment climate. We've heard that, gas infrastructure is key. We've heard that stakeholders must be carried along. We've heard that there are regulatory risks and conflicts that need to be dealt with. And it's also commendable that the Office of the Minister has been really, they've shown a lot of tenacity in carrying this on. We are hoping that it will be sustained and will be consistent as we go on. We've also declared it a decade of gas. We've made it clear that acceleration is really key in these times. And as it's a decade of gas, we've been left behind, and there's a lot that we need to do. Mrs. Ezigbo mentioned the fact that the window for funding for even gas, and I think Mr. Ekundaya as well, is very by ourselves. So we need to start to see how we can even start on this locally. For Mrs. Ezigbo, for example, gas is the bridge that brings social impact. It is the resource that can develop and grow the spirit of enterprise. I put it in my own words. And it's so phenomenal. So, there's so much that we need to do. We heard again that every state must have its own energy agenda. We must stop the rent-seeking, the milking attitude, and there must be alignment between the federal and the state as to what it is that we are seeking to do and how we meet these goals. Mr. Additional also alluded in his closing remarks the fact that we need to, between the state and federal government, we need to have a goal, and we need to monitor and evaluate how those goals are achieved, until we're able to achieve these goals. And it should align in everything that is done at every level of government. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a really interesting session. I'm sorry, there was a question for the Honorable Minister, but we're not able to take it because the Honorable Minister was not around, and then Mr. Derefaka had to leave. He sends his apologies. As I said, the Honorable Minister had some meetings to attend to that he could not extricate from. I hope that this has been a very useful session. And we at the Sustainability Policy Commission obviously have some takeaways, given that we at this session says that it's a decade of gas. It sets the tone for how we go out, looking at our energy sustainability panelists, Mrs. Joy Ezigbo, Mr. Felix Ekundayo, Mr. Ed. Thank you so much, Mr. Edu Bong. Thank you so much, Mr. Daya Additional. You are indeed one of us, and you are still one of us. Thank you so much for your time and for taking time to share out of your experience. Thank you, NESG, and thank you to the NESG team for making this possible. Thank you. So I think we
thank you, Dolabo. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Rounding up now, just something about NES 26. Thank you. Just to mention, thank you. Just mentioning that NES 36 holds on, I believe, is the October the 26th. I think it's we look forward to seeing you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks.